Everyone tells you to think like a winner. But here's what nobody says. Your relationship with losing determines whether you'll ever actually win. Think about this. The average person fails more times in a week than they even realize. Small failures, big failures, everything in between. Yet most of us treat every loss like a personal attack on who we are. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The people at the top of any field have lost more than you've even tried. Before we go deeper, a quick note for our Master Reading English community. I'll be speaking at a comfortable, measured pace throughout this video. Every word you hear will appear on screen, giving you the perfect opportunity to read along, absorb the pronunciation, and build your English fluency. This isn't just about the message. It's about mastering the language while learning powerful life lessons. In the next few minutes, you'll discover why losing gracefully isn't about accepting defeat. It's about building the exact psychological foundation that winners stand on. This isn't motivational fluff. This is how reality actually works. Your brain has a strange relationship with failure. When you lose at something, your nervous system reacts almost identically to physical danger. Your cortisol spikes, your heart rate increases, your thinking narrows. This is the failure response, and it evolved to keep you alive. But here's the problem. In modern life, this response destroys more opportunities than it protects. I just need to avoid mistakes. That's the voice of someone who doesn't understand the game. Here's what research shows. People who embrace failure early and often develop something called psychological flexibility. Their brains literally rewire to see setbacks as data instead of danger. Winners aren't people who never fall. They're people whose nervous systems have learned that falling isn't fatal. They've conditioned themselves to stay curious when everyone else gets defensive. The paradox is this. The moment you stop treating failure as the enemy, you remove its power over you. And that's when you become dangerous. Most people don't realize how much energy they waste on bad reactions to failure. Let's break down the real costs. When you lose badly, you typically do one of three things. You blame others, you blame circumstances, or you collapse into self-pity. All three are energy vampires. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic or you didn't get that promotion. How long did you replay it in your mind? Hours? Days? That's mental bandwidth you'll never get back. Here's the brutal math. If you spend even 30 minutes per day ruminating on small losses, that's 182 hours per year. That's more than a full week of waking hours consumed by unproductive thinking. Your mind has limited processing power. Scientists call this cognitive load. When your brain is running background programs of resentment and regret, it has less capacity for creativity, problem solving, and connection. Think of your mental energy like a smartphone battery. Every app running in the background drains it. That grudge you're holding from 3 months ago? It's still running. That embarrassing moment from last year you keep reliving? Still draining power. But I can't just let it go. Actually, you can. You're just choosing not to, because the alternative feels uncomfortable. Here's what actually happens when you refuse to release a loss. Your nervous system stays activated. Your body produces stress hormones meant for short-term survival, not long-term operation. Running on these chemicals daily isn't intensity, it's slow deterioration. Poor losers create a second-order problem. The initial failure is one thing, but then they damage relationships by being bitter. They miss the lesson in the loss. They telegraph weakness to everyone around them. The original setback becomes 3 or 4 setbacks. And here's what nobody tells you. Other people can sense when you're carrying old losses. It affects how they interact with you. They become careful around you, guarded. They stop bringing opportunities because they're not sure how you'll handle the next disappointment. Your reputation becomes talented but fragile, smart but defensive, capable but high maintenance. These invisible labels cost you more than the original failure ever did. Graceful losers cut their losses immediately. They extract value and move forward. This efficiency compounds over time into a massive advantage. They understand something fundamental. Holding on to a loss doesn't change the outcome. It only guarantees that one loss becomes many. The past is fixed. Your response to it is the only variable you control. Here's something most people miss. How you lose is training for how you win. Your emotional state during setbacks reveals your true operating system. Can you stay composed when things fall apart? Can you think clearly when you're disappointed? This capacity is your competitive edge. Most people save their best behavior for when things are going well. That's easy. That's default. Anyone can be calm and focused when they're winning. The real test is who you are when the scoreboard is against you. Think of emotional regulation like a muscle. Every time you practice composure during a loss, you're strengthening your ability to perform under pressure during a win. And just like physical muscles, emotional regulation develops through progressive overload. You don't start by staying calm during massive failures. You start with small irritations, the coffee spills, the traffic delays, the minor inconveniences. These are your training weights. Each time you choose a measured response over a reactive one, you're building capacity. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort doesn't require drama, that disappointment doesn't demand destruction. Professional athletes understand this instinctively. Watch how the best players respond after missing a crucial shot or losing a point. There's usually a brief physical reset, a deep breath, a specific gesture, then immediate refocus. They've ritualized their recovery. These rituals aren't superstition, they're deliberate psychological tools. The physical action interrupts the emotional spiral. It creates a pattern that the brain recognizes. This is how we process setbacks and move forward. Tennis players adjust their strings. Basketball players tug their jerseys. Soccer players clap their hands together once. The specific action doesn't matter. What matters is the consistent pattern that signals to their brain. We've processed this, now we continue. You can build your own reset ritual. It could be 3 deep breaths. It could be touching your watch. It could be saying a specific word to yourself. The key is consistency. Use it every time, and your brain will start associating that action with emotional recovery. I'm just an emotional person. That's a story you tell yourself, not a biological truth. Yes, some people have naturally stronger emotional responses. Some people's nervous systems are more sensitive. That's temperament. But temperament isn't destiny. It's just your starting point, not your ceiling. Being emotional isn't the problem. Being controlled by your emotions is the problem. There's a massive difference between feeling intensely and being hijacked by those feelings. The science is clear. Emotions are real, but your relationship with them is flexible. You can feel disappointment without becoming disappointment. You can experience frustration without being controlled by it. This distinction is everything. When you feel angry, you can observe the anger without immediately acting on it. When you feel discouraged, you can acknowledge the discouragement while still taking the next productive step. It's the difference between I am angry and I notice I'm experiencing anger right now. One is total identification, the other is aware observation. That shift in language reflects a shift in power dynamics. Here's the practice. When you face a setback, pause for exactly 10 seconds before reacting. In those 10 seconds, name what you're feeling. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling angry. Just naming it creates distance. Neuroscience calls this affect labeling. When you put words to your emotions, you activate the logical parts of your brain. This activation actually reduces the intensity of the emotional response. You're literally using language to regulate your nervous system. Try it next time you're upset. Say out loud or in your mind, I'm noticing frustration, not I'm frustrated. The subtle difference in phrasing creates psychological space. You're the observer of the emotion, not the emotion itself. That small gap between stimulus and response, that's where your power lives. In that gap, you choose whether this setback defines you or develops you. In that gap, you decide whether to react from fear or respond from wisdom. In that gap, you determine whether this loss ends your momentum or fuels your next attempt. The gap isn't always 10 seconds. Sometimes it's just 2 seconds. Sometimes you'll need 10 minutes. The duration doesn't matter as much as the awareness that the gap exists and that you have agency within it. Graceful losers have a secret weapon. They treat every failure as expensive education they've already paid for. The question isn't whether to learn from it. The question is how much value to extract. Most people ask the wrong question after failing. They ask, why me? Smart people ask, what now? Here's a framework. The 3-question debrief. After any loss, big or small, ask yourself these 3 questions within 24 hours. First, what specific action or decision led to this outcome? Be ruthlessly specific. I didn't prepare enough is too vague. I skipped reviewing the client's previous feedback is useful. Second, what would I do differently with the exact same information I had at decision time? This question is crucial. You can't fault yourself for not knowing what you couldn't have known. Third, what's one micro adjustment I can test next time? Notice it's micro, not massive. Small iterations beat dramatic overhauls. I already know what went wrong. If you haven't written it down and extracted specific changes, you don't actually know. You're just replaying the discomfort. The best learners keep a failure log, not to dwell on mistakes, but to track patterns. After 6 months, you'll see themes. Those themes are your roadmap to improvement. How you lose in public reveals more about your character than how you win. And people are always watching, even when you think they're not. When you lose gracefully in front of others, something interesting happens. Their respect for you often increases, not decreases. This is counterintuitive, but it's backed by solid psychology. People trust someone who can acknowledge a mistake without making excuses more than they trust someone who appears flawless. Perfection feels fake. Grace, under pressure, feels real. Think about apologies. A bad loser either doesn't apologize or gives a defensive non-apology. I'm sorry if you were offended. A graceful loser owns it completely. I was wrong about that. Here's what I'm doing to fix it. The difference isn't just moral, it's strategic. The person who apologizes well maintains relationships and gains opportunities. The defensive person burns bridges they don't even know they're standing on. I don't want to look weak. You've got it backwards. Defensiveness looks weak. Ownership looks strong. Here's a social grace principle. Compliment your competitor after they beat you. Not fake flattery. Genuine recognition of what they did well. This does 2 things. First, it makes you memorable in a positive way. Second, it keeps you in a learning mindset instead of a resentment spiral. Your reputation isn't built on your wins alone. It's built on the full picture of how you conduct yourself. Lose well, and people want to work with you. Lose badly, and they avoid you even when you're winning. Here's where losing gracefully becomes your ultimate strategic asset. Resilience compounds faster than any other trait. Every time you recover quickly from a setback, you're building psychological scar tissue. Not the kind that makes you bitter, the kind that makes you tougher without making you harder. Think of resilience like this. It's not about bouncing back to where you were. It's about using the bounce to go somewhere better. The floor you hit becomes your launching pad. Most people treat failure as a full stop. Resilient people treat it as a comma. The sentence continues. I've been knocked down too many times. That's exactly why you have an advantage. Each recovery shortened your recovery time. You're building a skill most people avoid developing. There's fascinating research on this. People who experience moderate adversity early in life often outperform both those who experienced extreme adversity and those who experienced almost none. The sweet spot isn't avoiding challenges, it's learning to navigate them. Here's how to leverage this. After each graceful loss, document your recovery time. How long from setback to productive action? Track this metric like an athlete tracks their speed. Watch it improve. That improvement is your competitive moat. The resilience compound effect means that by year 5 of practicing graceful losing, you're attempting and achieving things that would have destroyed you in year 1. Not because you're smarter or more talented, because you've removed fear of failure as a limiting factor. Most people attach their identity to their outcomes. When they lose, they feel like they are a loser. This is the fundamental error that keeps people stuck. Graceful losers separate their identity from their results. They see themselves as someone who attempts difficult things, and sometimes those attempts don't work. That's a completely different story. Think about how you introduce yourself. If your entire self-concept is wrapped up in achievements, losses feel existential. If your self-concept is wrapped up in values, courage, and growth, losses are just part of the process. "I'm a person who always succeeds" is a fragile identity. One major failure and your whole worldview shatters. "I'm a person who takes on challenges and learns from every outcome" is an anti-fragile identity. Failures actually strengthen it. This shift isn't just semantic. It changes your behavior at a root level. When losing doesn't threaten who you are, you take smarter risks. You speak up more. You try unconventional approaches. You become dangerous. Here's a practice. Rewrite your narrative about a past failure. Instead of "I failed at X", try "I attempted X, learned Y, and that led me to Z". Same facts, completely different story. That story determines your next moves. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't superhuman. They've just decoupled their sense of self from any single outcome. They've made peace with being a work in progress. There's a counterintuitive power in admitting when you've lost or made a mistake, but most people either overshare or undershare. Graceful losers have calibrated their vulnerability. Strategic vulnerability means sharing your failures in a way that builds connection and credibility without seeking pity or deflecting responsibility. When you share a loss strategically, you're saying, "I'm confident enough to be honest about this." That confidence is magnetic. Think about leaders you respect. Chances are they've openly discussed failures and what they learned. That transparency doesn't diminish them. It humanizes them and makes their successes more believable. "I don't want people to know I messed up." You're assuming they don't already know. Most failures aren't as invisible as you think. Your choice is whether to address it directly or let others create their own narrative. Here's the framework. Share the failure, own your part in it, articulate the lesson, and demonstrate the change. That's the complete cycle. Skip any step, and it becomes either self-pity or deflection. But timing matters. Don't share a wound while you're still bleeding from it. Process it first. Extract the lesson. Then, share from a place of integration, not raw emotion. Strategic vulnerability creates trust asymmetries. When you're appropriately open about your failures, others feel safe being real with you. That realness becomes the foundation for genuine relationships and surprising opportunities. In any competitive field, your ability to lose gracefully is actually more predictive of long-term success than your early wins. Why? Because everyone faces adversity eventually. The person who's practiced recovering is going to outperform the person who's been coasting on natural talent. Think about career progression. Two people go for the same promotion. One has a perfect track record because they only took safe bets. The other has some visible failures, but recovered and grew from each one. Who's more likely to handle the pressure of the bigger role? The one who knows how to lose every time. I need a perfect resume. Actually, you need a resume that shows calculated risk-taking and resilience. Employers aren't stupid. They know perfection is usually just risk avoidance. Here's what losing gracefully signals to others: composure under pressure, coachability, accountability, long-term thinking, and emotional maturity. Those are leadership traits. That's what opens doors. In negotiations, the person who can walk away from a bad deal without burning bridges has all the power. In innovation, the team that can fail fast and adjust has the advantage over the team that needs every attempt to succeed. Graceful losing isn't passive. It's ruthlessly pragmatic. It's asking what serves my long-term success instead of what protects my short-term ego. The competitive advantage compounds because most people never develop this skill. They're still treating every loss like a referendum on their worth. You've moved past that. You're 3 steps ahead while they're still stuck in reaction. One of the most valuable things you can do is help others develop a healthier relationship with failure. This isn't just altruism, it's enlightened self-interest. When you're surrounded by people who lose gracefully, you're in an environment that takes more intelligent risks and innovates faster. Rising tide lifts all boats. Think about how you respond when someone on your team or in your family fails at something. Do you pile on criticism? Do you rush to fix it? Or do you create space for them to process and learn? The best coaches and mentors don't shield people from failure. They help them develop the tools to navigate it productively. They need to learn the hard way. They do need to learn, but your reaction shapes what they learn. If they learn that failure means losing your respect, they'll start hiding mistakes. If they learn that failure is part of growth, they'll be transparent and improve faster. Here's a powerful question to ask someone who's just experienced a setback. What's the most useful thing you're taking from this? Not, why did this happen? Not, how do you feel? Those questions can come later. Lead with learning extraction. When you model graceful losing, you give others permission to be imperfect. That permission is liberating. It unlocks potential that was hiding behind fear. And here's a selfish reason to teach this. Explaining these principles to others forces you to internalize them deeper. Teaching is the ultimate form of learning. Graceful losing is ultimately about playing the long game. It's recognizing that any single loss is a tiny data point in a much larger trajectory. Most people have a 24-hour perspective. They're devastated by yesterday's loss and anxious about tomorrow's challenge. Graceful losers have a 10-year perspective. They can see how today's setback might be tomorrow's setup. Think about the most successful person you know. Now count how many significant failures they experienced on the way. The number is probably higher than you'd guess. The difference is they kept playing while others quit. This is the survivor's advantage. But it's not about luck. It's about conditioning yourself to stay in the game longer than others. I don't have time to keep failing. You don't have time not to. The alternative is stagnation, and stagnation is just slow failure. Here's the long game framework. Measure yourself in decades, not days. Ask, will this matter in 10 years? Most losses won't. That question brings instant perspective. Document your journey. 5 years from now, you'll look back at what felt like a catastrophic failure and see it was actually a critical turning point, but only if you processed it well and kept moving. The long game perspective also changes how you celebrate wins. If losses aren't personal tragedies, wins aren't personal vindications. They're just positive outcomes in a series of experiments. This keeps you humble during success and stable during setbacks. Winning and losing aren't opposites. They're partners in the same dance. Every principle we've covered, from emotional regulation to strategic vulnerability, from learning extraction to identity shifting, they all point to one truth. Your relationship with losing determines your ceiling for winning. The people at the top haven't eliminated failure from their lives. They've eliminated the fear of failure from their psychology. Remember, you will lose. That's guaranteed. The only question is whether those losses make you brittle or unbreakable. Start practicing today. The next time something doesn't go your way, pause for 10 seconds. Breathe. Name what you're feeling. Ask what you're learning. Respond with grace instead of reaction. That small shift, it's the beginning of becoming someone who can attempt anything without fear of falling. And that's when you become truly unstoppable. The best time to start losing gracefully isn't after your next big failure. It's right now, with the small daily setbacks that are teaching you who you want to become.